I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for the morning. This is Professor Dr. Erszébet Barát from CEU, representing, I suppose, both Austria and Hungary in one. And she has received the UNESCO Janusz Korczak Chair Jubilee Medal yesterday, so I feel particularly privileged that she agreed to speak to us today. After that, we will have a presentation by Professor Błażej Kmieciak from the Maria Grzegorzewska University, and then another address by Dr. Piotr Toczyski, also from our university. Many of the presentations have been already published in a book edited by Dr. Ewa Dąbrowa in the UNESCO Chair Series, Acceptance, Participation, Solidarity. It is available in open access to save the planet and the trees on the university website and on the publisher's website, and we'll be sharing a link with all of you after the conference. So once again, thank you so much for being here. And I would like to give the floor to Professor Dr. Erszébet Barát.
Okay, so I'm not going to be standing all the time, but for a start, I would like to thank you, okay, and the University of Maria Grzegorzewska for the medal that I received totally unexpectedly, and I feel very humbled by that. So thank you very much. And I hope what I have to say now, to some extent at least, is going to live up to the recognition. So thank you very much. Okay, now some disclaimers at the beginning. First of all, you would like to know that my field of scholarship, research and teaching has got to do with gender studies and critical studies of discourse. And that means that I'm interested in exploring the ideological investment of the meaning of different concepts on the one hand, and on the other hand, intersecting with it. Most recently, what I have been focusing on in the context of the anti-gender politics all over Europe, and I can say globally now, is how to understand transness. So I have designed a course on transfeminism, and in that context, what figures very centrally is the understanding of embodiment. So at the intersection of those two interests, I was thrilled to be able to put together a talk, and in that one, what I would like to do, partly unexpectedly in response to some of yesterday's concerns in the workshop at the end, is to reflect on the very concept of disabledness. Okay, and I'm trying to provide a framework that would understand it as a matter of social practice and a matter of social forms of social injustice. In other words, what I'm trying to present here in 15 minutes, okay, is like to how to rename what we are dealing with. Okay, so in that sense, at the highest level, speaking to philosophers, one could say that this is about the politics of naming. Okay, so above all, the event that I am going to use for analysis, okay, and attracted my attention for today's talk, is the French movie Anatomy of a Fall, okay, which won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Festival last May. It has a powerful scene in it. The widowed wife, Sandra Voiter's defense, is challenged by the prosecution in the courtroom about the limited value of Daniel, her son's recollections of the events preceding the father's death, his fall, and this concern is voiced due to Daniel's blindness. The boy is sitting in the courtroom throughout the whole trial, so he is there at this moment as well. The mother is disturbed by the lawyer's assumption that we can only succeed in life by overcoming disability, which, in her view, is clearly not the case in Daniel's life. She immediately interrupts the lawyer to protest. She is underscoring that after the family car accident, she has made sure that Daniel would never think that he should be living an imperfect life as a visually impaired boy. She points out that his life is as valuable as any other kid's life of his age. He can play the piano, he can go on walks on the hillside with his guide dog, and he has grown into a confident teenager. The spectator will know that this is a crucial point for the mother, as at this point she switches into English, breaking the court's expectation that she should speak French while on trial for killing the husband. Although I am suspicious of the director's use of code switching, as it is against the existing policies on providing court interpreters in Switzerland, where the film is set, I understand that he opted for his unwarranted solution to index and underscore this point in the film narrative. So, how to read the scene and the director's decision beyond the normative discourse of disability? What does inclusivity mean here? There are a couple of important questions to ask when considering the mother's understanding of inclusivity. How could we foster a positive space in the face of rejection and hostility that is brought about the normalization of ability? How could we subvert the logic that links defects with the need for cure? Otherwise, we are leaving the body open to shame. I argue that for that move, we need to challenge the understanding that disability equals deficit, and it is only naturally desirable to be cured. Where can we turn to find a logic that moves beyond the perspective of perfection? That is what the original, longer title of my talk actually formulates as "What is at stake? How to grant personhood to all forms of embodied life beyond the routine ideology of ableism and its promise of overcoming." I think what the mother in Anatomy of a Fall challenges is the humanistic ideology of cure and the restructuration or resetting of social order. Her protest articulates the perspective that Ellie Care in their 2017 book calls brilliant imperfection. I shall argue for 3 key elements to be subverted for a shift towards a favorable discourse of naming. I think imperfection then can be argued to be linked with Jasbir Puar's preference for the term crip bodies, crip lives, instead of disabled bodies. Puar challenges not only the fact that disability may evoke able bodies as inherently the preferred form of embodiment and more valuable form of life. In addition, she also points out that the naming is also a move that routinely devisibilizes maimed bodies, precisely because debility is profitable for neoliberal capitalism. The politics of neoliberal capitalism relies on technologies that necessitate effective dimensions of control as ways of undermining biopolitical agency. Pua's introduction of debility pushes us to rethink disability as a matter of social justice and not necessarily only reduced to a matter of medicalization. I am certainly not arguing in favor of an anti-cure politics on the whole. I am not arguing that one should not seek some bodily change and treatment. What I am arguing for is a different logic informing the ways we name those needs and desires as social requirements. In agreement with Ellie Clare, a trans-feminist scholar, I propose to deconstruct and challenge the assumptions of normal and natural evoked by the fetishization of cure that implicates certain bodily existence as disabled, imperfect, defected, and as such to be mended. So now the analysis of the scene in terms of redefinition of inclusivity, this social-oriented redefinition of inclusivity. I think the mother in the courtroom is resisting precisely the shame that is routinely reiterated by the prosecutor's judgment of her son's impaired vision. That tries to medicalize Danielle's sense of identity. Her intervention shuts up the dominant logic that tries to get in the way of the boy's coming home to his body. More importantly, what is at stake in the protest, in the parents' success at understanding and passing on that understanding to their son, that his body is irrevocably different from how he used to be before the family car accident. We are not told anything or shown any flashbacks about the actual education that the parents took up after the accident. The spectator can assess those efforts through the self-confidence of the boy in the courtroom and through the upset of the mother. In fact, we, the viewers, are only made aware retrospectively how much effort that education must have meant. Up to this point, we are not reminded of Daniel's impaired vision through any diagnosis that could trigger our sympathy, precisely because both the film narrative and the visuality sidestep such disabling consequences. The inclusivity of the film consists in inviting us, the viewers, to tacitly understand that Daniel's bodily life is irrevocably different from others, but without associating this life, Daniel's life, with any of three possible interlocking stigmatizing moves of disability. So now here comes the three things that are not evoked by the filmmakers. One could be that there is a necessary sense of defect evoked. The problem with the element of defect is that it should, ironically, trivialize the emotional, intellectual, and bodily work it takes not to be caught in the logic of ableism. At the same time, it could deliver for the able-bodied gaze the understanding that Daniel's condition is that of medical disability. However, we could argue that his condition is that of social injustice. What mothers like Sandra Voiter and sons like Daniel need is rights and recognition, the denaturalization of entitlements of the perfect bodily life and reconfiguring it as a matter of politics. As Ellie Clare powerfully puts it, quote, "For me, having cerebral palsy is like having blue eyes and red hair. I simply do not know my body any other way," end of quote. The second dimension of entanglement of the association of disability with defect is body shame. Instead of the shortcut to some unwarranted promise of cure that can only indirectly invoke some bodily or intellectual wrongness, we should need to find ways of giving space for Daniel's own understanding of his feelings of grief, disgust, anger, or hatred, should they emerge. These are powerful or even overwhelming emotions, but lived in a space that is not inflicted by the routine naming that should invite a discourse of shame. The formation of such a space includes the decision, if the people concerned are willing or able to be visible and exposed to some public scrutiny. We could therefore interpret the director's decision not to have any flashbacks about Daniel's life after the car accident as an act that grants that privacy that is not an option for the disabled body that is constantly exposed to the scrutiny of the medical gaze. Finally, the third element entangled in the meaning of defect, disability, is the idea of compulsory normalcy. We should try to disentangle the so-called disabled life forms from the sense of disorder by disassociating the diagnosis from non-ordinary, to allow for living one's disabled bodies as familiar and ordinary may subvert the power that the medical gaze may hold on them. The deconstruction of these three elements could allow for a disability politics that does not confine those concerned to a so-called disabled body. Now for a closure, I would rather like to open up a trajectory for further analysis, which I did not carry out today. Above all, because the film I have chosen does not problematize Puar's major concern about Crip nationalism. But it could be a valuable point for critical pedagogic research to consider how economic imperialism may drive on disability as a way of selecting and preparing bodies for economic production, manufacturing disabled bodies as an effect of consolidating notions of normative embodiment. We could consider the role of disaster capitalism in creating and maintaining economies of disability, drawing on Puar, who makes a compelling point about how the social practice of debilitation is constitutive of neoliberal capitalism. This could invite a critique that exposes that inclusive pedagogy is marginalized today at the intersection of producing multicultural subjects and at the intersection of intensified domestication of critical pedagogy in a society of post-democratic centralization of power, teacher training included. Against this dominant tendency, we need to try to interrogate and integrate the political, the pedagogical, and research. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was very inspiring.